What's up, guys? Mickle here, and there's been a lot of statements, not only by people in the XRP community, but people at Ripple itself say that XRP could one day be a global reserve currency. In this video, I want to show you all the statements of people at Ripple actually saying this and talk about what this would mean for XRP and is this even possible? Does this mean the price of XRP would have to be set at a certain amount? Does this mean that XRP would somehow take over the dollar and become the dominant reserve currency for the entire world? In this video, I want to talk about that because there is a ton of speculation in the XRP community about it, and I want to give you my thoughts. Towards the end of the video, though, I also want to talk about some brand new news in the XRP community concerning Ripple's expansion in the United States. Guys, Ripple has spent a long time not doing any business in the US because of the Ripple SEC case. I want to show you some very positive signs at the end of the video involving that, so make sure to stick around for this whole thing. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who likes the videos and is subscribed. It really does help me out so much. And with that said, though, let's jump right into it right after a quick word from the sponsor of this video. So I want to start this video off and show you some of the things people at Ripple have said about XRP possibly one day being a global reserve currency, because I think a lot of people hear this narrative and think it was just a narrative made up by the XRP community, made up by moon boys who invest into XRP. But I want to show you that this narrative was actually created by some of the highest up people at Ripple. But after we talk about what they said, I want to give you my thoughts on it. So listen up to this. The first thing Brad Garlinghouse said, he said, I think the role of a digital asset like XRP is really to be a bridge currency to enable a tremendous amount of efficiency and really allow for globalization of payments in a way that has never been done before. In 2018, Brad Garlinghouse said, I think that the long-term value of digital assets is going to be derived from the utility it delivers. XRP has a lot of utility in terms that it solves a multi-trillion-dollar problem. Chris Larson said, XRP is the only digital asset with clear institutional use cases designed to solve a multi-trillion-dollar problem, the global payment and liquidity challenges that banks and payment providers and corporates face. In 2018, Chris Larson said, we think that XRP has a real chance of being a global digital reserve currency used by financial institutions and customers alike. And as Sheesh Burla said, XRP is uniquely positioned to solve a multi-trillion-dollar problem, and we believe it has the potential to be a global standard for digital assets and payments. So right here, we can see that Brad Garlinghouse, Chris Larson, and many other people at Ripple have really contributed to the narrative that XRP is solving a multi-trillion-dollar problem and can become a neutral reserve asset for the entire financial system. Now, when a lot of people hear these comments, they think people are trying to say that XRP is going to take over the dollar. XRP is going to replace fiat currencies. XRP is going to be forced upon individuals in jurisdictions as a new coin for payments. And guys, that is simply not the case. We are not ever going to be in a world where the dollar is replaced by XRP. We are never going to be in a place in the world where every single person in America is going to the store and buying things with XRP. And that is not what any of these people are saying in these quotes right here. And it's not anything that anyone with a rational mind thinks is going to happen. We are never going to have a world where everyone is using a volatile currency for payments. It simply doesn't make sense. Your average person wants things to be pegged to a single unit. The average person wants a dollar. That's just the facts. Most of my friends can't even comprehend the most basic things around payments. They are never going to understand how to go to the store and buy something with a volatile currency, nor would they want to. And honestly, I don't think I would want to either. But that doesn't mean XRP can't be a digital reserve currency. The world we're heading into is a world where nations all around the world are separating from one another. We are watching nations not want to use each other's currencies anymore because essentially other nations have financialized currencies against each other. The United States froze all of Russia's assets, all of their dollars. The United States is using the US dollar as a weapon, and it's forcing countries all over the world to reevaluate their strategy in how they look at currency. We are moving into a world where it's easier than ever for a nation to drum up a CBDC and have their own sovereign currency, and I think we're going to see that activity explode over the next 10 years. This is going to put the US dollar in a position where it's no longer the go-to currency for other nations. It doesn't make sense for Russia to be paying Saudi Arabia in the US dollar. Neither of them have the US dollar, neither of them need the US dollar, and honestly, they just have the risk of the United States coming in and messing things up. We are moving to a multipolar world where there's going to be a lot of important currencies out there, and every nation likely is just going to use their own currency rather than relying on someone else. In this world, it is going to be increasingly more important to have decentralized neutral currencies that no one owns. If everyone is using their own currency and there's no US dollar, a currency where everyone just agrees that's the currency they're going to use, if that doesn't exist anymore, you're going to need neutral currencies to bridge all the centralized currencies. That is where XRP is perfectly positioned to dominate and be that global reserve currency. It's never going to be a country's global reserve currency. It's never going to take over the fiat currency of a country, but it's going to be one of the best digital assets as a neutral liquidity source that no one can own or control. As we move into a world where nations have less trust for each other, as we move into a world where nations can't use each other's currencies for fear of repercussions, they are going to look for neutral liquidity assets to bridge the systems. That is where XRP solves the multi-trillion-dollar problem. It's not going down and replacing the dollar on a micro scale. It's not replacing these different fiat currencies internally. It's bridging all these different currencies together as we go into a multipolar world of digital assets. XRP is always going to be a neutral liquidity source that any nation, institution, country, or small business can draw off of and not have the risk of a counterparty seizing their assets or taking control of the system. I hope that really helps you wrap your head around exactly how XRP can be positioned as this neutral global reserve currency without actually saying it's going to replace the dollar. It doesn't have to replace the dollar to act as a global reserve asset. Now, the next thing I quickly want to talk about, and I put a video about this out last night, is whether or not XRP needs a set price to achieve these things. And in my opinion, absolutely not, right? It doesn't even make any sense. And I think the best way to think about how this doesn't make sense is just to think about the fact that if there's 10 billion XRP, right, and we pegged every XRP to $1, well, that would give us a market cap for XRP of $100 billion worth of liquidity in the XRP ledger ecosystem. But what's the biggest issue with that? Well, XRP is deflationary. So we would constantly be having XRP burned out of the ecosystem. And what happens to market cap as we get less XRP? Well, say in the future we had 50 billion XRP because the other 50 billion got burned due to the transaction fee. Well, then our liquidity would only be 50 billion rather than 100 billion. So that's why in this entire scenario of XRP becoming this decentralized global reserve currency, it makes absolutely no sense to peg the currency to anything. XRP's best feature is that the price of XRP can scale infinitely to make the network exponentially more liquid. If the network needs more liquidity, XRP's price goes up, and boom, suddenly XRP is exponentially more liquid than it was before. If you were to peg the price of XRP, XRP would not have this infinite liquidity scaling feature, and it would be a drastic hit to the network. So I put a short out about that last night, and I just clickbaited everyone. I said XRP's price set by the IMF at 10K. Guys, things like this, these narratives are never going to happen. I see them go viral all the time. I just wanted to make sure you guys understood that. I want to finish this video off with one thing that I think is very, very exciting and something that I didn't expect to be happening this soon. And that's that Ripple is actually expanding back into the United States. We know that the Ripple SEC case essentially told big financial institutions in the United States, hey, you can't go near this company. Regardless of what you think about where the future is headed, regardless of how interested you are in digital payments and digital currencies, you can't touch Ripple. And This is something that was a massive hit for Ripple's business over the short term, because essentially they could only land customers outside the United States, and it made no sense for them to expand into the United States. But what we're seeing, and this is actually from a Finance Feed article, so very reliable traditional source, they're saying that Ripple is currently looking to explore all kinds of new partnerships in the United States. This is very exciting because it means that Ripple is finally growing in the financial capital of the world, the United States. The United States is the most important place for Ripple to get big because it is the center of all markets. It looks like to me Ripple is starting to acknowledge that institutions no longer trust the SEC's case against them. When the SEC first filed their case against Ripple, all the different businesses that wanted to work with Ripple were forced to just take the SEC side of things to be precautious. They didn't want to make any risks expanding with Ripple as a critical infrastructure in their payment stack if essentially the SEC was right and Ripple was doing all these illegal things. But what we're seeing by Ripple actually hiring and expanding in the United States is institutions are starting to finally understand what the XRP community has known since day one. The SEC is full of you-know-what. They had no case against Ripple to start, and all they have done is prove that Ripple is one of the most responsible companies in the cryptocurrency industry. Guys, I hope this really helps you understand what we are on the verge of, what we are on the precipice of, and how well Ripple and XRP are positioned going into our next generation financial system. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It's really going to help me out so much. And for now, Mickle out.